Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. My name is Lynn Palazzo, and I'm the owner of Collegiate Success Coaching, a small private academic coaching practice in Roswell, Georgia. I am joined tonight by my colleague and director of group coaching, Janina Dehart, who in her day job is also I might get this wrong, assistant director of accessibility resources. Although I think she has a new title, so I might have that wrong, at Western Carolina University in Cullowhee, North Carolina. So we want to be very aware of your time, and so I wanted to make sure that we just that you know what our agenda is for the evening. But I'm going to hand it over to Janina, and she's going to get started with all the ways that academic coaching can support a college student with ADHD. Janina?
Thanks, Lynn. So it's great to see everybody, and we will go ahead and get started. And yes, I do work at Western Carolina University in the Office of Accessibility Resources, and I did just get a promotion, so I'm the associate director now for TRIO programs. But it was close. There we go. So okay, so we are going to be focusing this evening on how coaching supports academic progress for college students with ADHD. And I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a minute, but I want to go ahead and if you go to the next slide, we'll just review the agenda briefly to see exactly where we're headed. And so we've done the welcome, but we're going to start off by talking about some of the common challenges that college students face, especially students with ADHD, because that's our focus with our coaching services, are are in supporting students with ADHD. We're going to talk a little bit about what is coaching and how coaching differs from other common types of supports that students may have access to on college campuses. And then I'll wrap up my presentation with talking about the individual benefits of coaching and then hand it off to Lynn, who will then do a presentation called Rescue to Resilience. And so she's going to be sharing some actual kind of case studies and stories from our practice and the parent perspectives from those. And then we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. So I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. I am, I do work at Western Carolina University in North Carolina, and I have been in higher ed for over 25 years. I've done a lot in the area of academic support, um, coordinating transition programs for students, and working with students in academic difficulty, leading initiatives around that to support students who have experienced low grades or academic probation and suspension. But I also have coordinated programs for incoming freshmen to help with their first year experience. And now, more recently, in the last few years, I've transitioned into working in disability services in terms of helping students establish accommodations and also in receiving support and being able to have access to what they need while they're in college. If you want to go ahead and advance the slide, sorry, I guess I need to say that each time. So there I am. And so I've been partnering with Lynn now for the last 2 or 3 years, and my main role with Collegiate Success Coaching is doing the group coaching. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Next slide. So I want to start in by talking about some of these common challenges that we experience, that college students experience when they are transitioning into college. Obviously, there are a lot of differences between high school and college, and especially for students with ADHD, sometimes that is a huge transition. High school tends to be very structured and there's a lot of support. And so at the college level, it's students are really more their own director, so to speak. So it's up to them to manage and be responsible for their progress, for navigating that experience. And so one of the biggest challenges that I see in working with college students is them learning how to manage those things on their own, how to keep themselves organized, stay on track, and especially with students with ADHD, some of those executive function aspects of just managing themselves, but also staying focused in their studies, in their classes. The academic load and the academic rigor is much more significant at the college level. So, depending on what somebody's experience was in high school, um, now, I work at a public university and I've worked in public school systems. So I see a lot of students from public schools, but also from private schools or even students who were homeschooled. And so, depending on what a student's background is, they may be more academically prepared for the rigors of college. But at the same time, I think there's still that transition for students coming into the college classroom and not maybe knowing effective note taking strategies or how to effectively study and how to best maximize their learning. And so they may have difficulty with the amount of reading in college or the types of papers that they're required to write. And sometimes that causes them to lose motivation because there's a lot happening at one time. So that academic load and their course load can become overwhelming to juggle. Let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned executive function, and some of the ways that we really see this play out with college students is with making wise decisions. And this is actually a process that I use with students. It's called the wise choice process. And it's in looking at, okay, what's the current situation? How are things currently going? How do you want it to be? And then what steps do you take to get there? And so that's just a pretty simple little process to teach students. But at the same time, sometimes students don't recognize that they have the power, they have the ability to make those choices and to direct their path. And so, some of these executive function skills that may be impacted, especially by ADHD, would be remembering things, right? The working memory, um, translating that information, taking the notes, paying attention, being able to listen to a lecture, figure out what's important about that, get it down into some type of format, and then being able to study it effectively so that you can recall the information later. That's a lot of um, executive function that's happening in that prefrontal cortex, what we call the frontal lobe. And that's where those things happen and take place. And so that can also come about in making decisions because sometimes students lack that sense of urgency, or they may have trouble getting started on a task or prioritizing what's the most important thing I need to be working on first, and then what do I need to do next? And sometimes students just get really stuck, especially the heavier their workload is and the more that they have to do. Sometimes we go into just that fight, flight, or freeze, and sometimes students will just freeze and get stuck and not be able to get started on those assignments, especially big projects or papers. And so that also plays into how well are they able to plan ahead and plan that work out over time so that they're meeting their deadlines and getting those large assignments, especially done, and breaking that into smaller chunks so that they're making that progress instead of procrastinating and waiting until the last minute, which also ties into, especially with ADHD, we call it time blindness, right? Our brains don't necessarily see time the same as maybe some other students where, checking those boxes and keeping track of those tasks might become a little easier. But with ADHD, sometimes um, because of the way our brains work, we are relying on the adrenaline we get from coming down to the wire and meeting that deadline to give us that dopamine boost so that we can get the task done. And so, learning different strategies around managing those tasks and being able to follow through are important skills and strategies. Next slide. So another aspect of college is, students are living on their own, living in communal spaces with other students. Sometimes that may be their first experience living with others. But one aspect of ADHD that we do see quite often is social anxiety. Sometimes students are just not comfortable being in groups or especially new situations with other people, and they may need help knowing maybe how to make friends or how to get connected in some of these social settings. And then as they make those friends, then how to maintain those friendships and those relationships. Sometimes the impulsivity of ADHD can come into play here because when friends want to go do something in the moment, then they jump at that opportunity and they may not think through, like, oh, well, I really should be working on this assignment right now instead of going and um, playing ball or doing, an activity or going to something else. And so that can also happen. But also, just in general, with just the stress of college and the amount, we've talked about the workload and navigating these different challenges, and just those transitions that can cause a lot of stress and anxiety to build up, especially in a new setting. Because one of the things I say when students are coming to college, everything in their life is changing: where they eat, where they live, where they sleep, who they're hanging out with, what they're doing during the day. And so, especially for students with ADHD, when you experience that much transition, our brains can get easily overwhelmed. And so, our ability to tolerate the stress really depends on how many effective coping skills we have and how well we can really balance those things out and respond in a way that's healthy. And so, how we're taking care of our health, how we're managing our emotions, because emotional regulation is also another big piece of ADHD, as well as sleep. It's pretty common for folks with ADHD to actually have sleep disorders and difficulty with sleep. And of course, when students move to college and they're on their own, sometimes they're staying up later than they did before, or their sleep gets off. And so it can be something that they're really going to have to work hard to manage themselves and learn strategies around that, being an independent student. Next slide. So, these are the challenges we've discussed, and how can students receive support in addressing those challenges and coming up with skills and strategies to be successful as college students? So, coaching does provide this opportunity, and coaching is a way to help students have support for navigating all of these various transitions and experiences that they have in college. And the nice thing about coaching is it's really tailored to the individual student. So they receive personalized guidance that's specifically focused on their own goals, and it gives them a path forward. So with coaching, we're really looking at that path forward. Like, how do we help students navigate their college journey in a way that works best for them by utilizing their strengths and using those strengths to address challenges and concerns that come up along the way. And so, as a coach, we look at ourselves kind of like a guide on the ride, so to speak, is that we're there to help the student learn how to navigate that experience, learn how to maneuver through some of those obstacles and barriers, and use their resources along the way. And so, part of this is also in helping them develop some of these skills and strategies and learning how to not just be accountable for things, but hold themselves accountable. So personal accountability comes into play, as well as just other tools. We call it tools in your tool belt. So that could be technology. Of course, AI is becoming very popular, and there's some really great tools, AI tools, that can help students with some of those executive functions and managing some of those tasks and keeping track of things and um, better utilizing information in a way that may help or work better for them. But we also look at how do students learn and how do they best maximize their learning effectively. And one of the things we do is we teach students um, basically how to learn more effectively, like learn about the way they learn, think about the way they think, and that's called metacognition. And so there's some real intentionality behind this of specific steps and strategies they can go through that really allows them to learn the information, retain the information, recall the information so that they have an easier time with their success. So, when it comes to different types of coaching, basically there's individual coaching, which can be around different topics or themes. Of course, from the college setting, we're typically doing academic coaching with students. It can also be life coaching. So, this is, I say, part of one of the biggest classes, so to speak, that students have in college is Life 101, because they're becoming those independent adults. And we're hoping they're becoming mature, responsible adults, right? But there's a lot of learning that takes place during that period of time. So they're learning who they want to be, how they want to be around others, and then taking that path towards their career and future goals. So there's a lot of life that happens there, but also that career development, developing those professional skills and um, soft skills, like the interpersonal types of skills that they need to really be able to thrive and be successful in the future. So we also can approach coaching from a group format. And usually, group coaching may take a couple of different forms, but the most common is for it to be a cohort based, where a group of students goes through a process together. So, usually, it is time bound, so it's a structured, um, usually like a 6 or 8 week program that the students may go through together during the course of the semester so that they have each other as a resource, but then they also have the coach who's facilitating the group as a resource. And I want to share an example of this. I think go to the next slide. Um, well, so first, let me say sometimes folks get coaching mixed up with counseling. And of course, I'm a certified counselor. So this is one of the ways that I help make this distinction because there are other types of support services usually offered on college campuses. So no matter where somebody's going to college, they're typically going to have these different types of services available. Usually campuses are going to offer counseling services. So there would be a counseling center that provides individualized counseling and even group sessions as well
Mhm.
around different themes. And so the difference here is that coaching is very focused on the present and moving forward. And counseling, whereas counseling may go back and determine the why behind why am I approaching things this way? What has happened in my past that's causing me to maybe act in a certain way or react in a certain way? And so, especially if a student has a mental health condition like depression or anxiety or post traumatic stress, sometimes those things in the past are really impacting how they are in the present. And so, counseling really is that therapeutic approach of going back and working through some of those past wounds or that psychological and emotional needs that the student may have. And so that's different from coaching. Now, it doesn't mean that coaches are not empathetic or don't, I mean, we definitely do listen and we help students work through those processes, but it's a little bit of a different focus there. And so sometimes that's a distinction we make with students is to say, okay, if things are coming up for them, we may say, okay, here's the piece I can help you with in this session, or as you're looking at your goals and looking to move forward. But this, if you really want to go back and work through some of this trauma you experienced as a child, for example, that's something that you would need to do with your counselor or therapist. And of course, tutoring services are available. Those are more specific, like subject-based and course-based content where peer supports usually help students with that content in those specific classes, and also usually includes some like general study skills and academic skills there as well. And then academic advising is another area of support on campuses where advisors work with students to help them learn what their degree requirements are, what classes they need to take to achieve those requirements, maybe discussions around majors or minors if they're selecting those, and then helping them keep tabs on their academic progress and making sure they're maintaining that progress towards completing that degree. And then, of course, disability services or accessibility offices exist on the college campuses as well. And again, those are more to help students set up their accommodations, make sure they have access to maybe it's test proctoring or other types of accommodations. It could even include being able to use assistive technology in some way, whether that's with note taking or maybe they need books in a audio format, things like that. And some offices do provide coaching, maybe on a limited scale. It could be for maybe a limited number of students, or it could be for students who meet certain eligibility criteria.
Mhm. Mhm.
So those are just kind of an overview of some different services. But I want to give, let me go to the next slide. So just to kind of recap, some benefits that coaching provides is that it really gives that individualized support for the students and helps them not just monitor how they're performing academically, but keeping on task and on track with their skills. And again, learning those skills and strategies specifically to ADHD, how we can manage the executive function piece of prioritizing things, planning ahead, making sure we're completing tasks, and all of this leads to increased retention rates. And research does show that students who go through coaching have higher rates of persistence and retention over time,
Mhm.
which then leads to higher rates of graduation. Because ultimately, for those of us in higher ed, that's our goal, right? Hopefully, as parents and as professionals, we have the same goal. We want our students to be successful. And so building that resiliency so that they can persist and graduate is a key goal there. And also just that emotional, developing that emotional maturity, knowing how to manage and navigate relationships. And that could be professional relationships as well as interpersonal relationships. Um, so all of those skills come into place. And ultimately, coaching leads to higher rates of satisfaction and just positive outcomes overall. Students feel more confident, more motivated, more capable. Sometimes that's one of the biggest hurdles that I see students with is that they may just initially just not feel that they're capable of being successful. And so it's helping them not only see and recognize their strengths, but knowing how to use those strengths so that they do achieve that success. So, in closing, I want to give an example here. If you go to the next slide, of what that group format might look like. Now, with Collegiate Success Coaching, we do offer a group program called Focus Forward. And this is a combination of that structured weekly group coaching format along with individual peer support. And so this gives you an overview here of how we structure those sessions. And the unique thing about this program is that it weaves together three different components in each session. So each session is going to include information about ADHD because that's part of what we want students to know and understand how our ADHD brains work and how we can then approach things based on that knowledge. And then we teach behavioral strategies. So this is where we get into some of those real practical tips and tricks, as I call it, the tools in our tool belt of how we can navigate these different things. So we talk about how to access and use campus resources, what to do with that planner. I have students all the time who say, the last thing I need is somebody to tell me to use a planner and some sticky notes. And I'm like, yeah, but how are you using your planner? Sticky notes. So it may just be you need a different kind of planner or a different approach to it. And so then the third area here is adaptive thinking. Now, this is based on cognitive behavioral principles. And cognitive behavior therapy or training is one of the most positive ways to approach working with students with ADHD and has seen a lot of success. And so we weave that into this program so that we teach students how to overcome those negative thinking patterns that might be holding them back and adapt that thinking or shift that thinking to more positive forward thinking and future focused thinking so that they can have a better outcome. And so that's part of this process as well. So each group session will touch on each of those three areas. And then each week, we basically the first 3 weeks is like the building blocks where we teach the process. And then from there, it's each week has a different topic that we focus on. So we'll focus on school, classes, academic things, and then we shift into um, how we just manage stress and studying. And then we do talk about medication management and some of those aspects of ADHD. And then we get into the social aspects of ADHD and the social relationships. And then towards the end, we start looking forward at what are those long-term goals that they want to achieve, and then how do they maintain that progress over time. So that's just an example of how our group coaching is set up, and that's definitely something we'd be happy to talk with you more about or share with you if you're interested in our particular program. But I'm going to pass it over to Lynn now to talk more about the individual side of things and also then to talk to you as parents about what are the benefits to you as a family when your students participate in coaching.
Thank you so much, Janina. I really appreciate it. Whenever I listen to Janina speak, I always wish that she was my coach. So I just think if she had been my coach my freshman year of college, what a different experience I would have had. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm thrilled to have Janina on the team. So, okay, I'm just gonna kind of dovetail on some of the things that Janina brought up, but I also want to recognize that your child's ADHD probably has an impact on your whole family. Um, and recognize that rather than this transition to college feeling like uh, a risky thing that you might have to rescue your child from, that you can actually use coaching to pattern resilience and to save a lot of stress and anxiety for your student and for yourselves. So that's kind of the direction we're going to go. We definitely want to look at how you're functioning now if you have a student starting in the fall and the contrast between high school and college. So, Logan, if you could just give me the first slide. Oh, sorry, there's a little bit more about me. You can read that, everyone, but I've been working with college students for a long time. It's been my entire desire since I was in my early 20s to just help as many college students as possible get the full benefit of how they can change the trajectory of their lives by finishing a bachelor's degree. We have so much research telling us of the benefits of education in every culture, every society, every religion on our entire planet. What people most want for their children is more education. So you can read the details of my career there, but let's just say I'm in it for the long haul and I'm passionate about what I do. So we can go to the next slide. All right. So you have a particular perspective right now. You are most likely your student's primary manager. You have been in a manager role for quite some time. Now, maybe you noticed the shift from middle school to high school, where maybe you moved into a little more of a coaching, where you wanted your child to step up. And so maybe you stopped using so much telling language and maybe you started asking your child some more open-ended questions to kind of give them an opportunity to think through processes and how to get things done and all that good stuff. But I think it's safe to say most parents who have a high school senior are still doing management like things. So there's some parallels here to if any of you are managers in your working roles. But let's say you, at a minimum, probably get, even with sports and activities, I know they're super busy, but you probably get a daily check-in with your student. This, you could call this a 5-minute stand-up meeting, right? Where it's just like a quick visual check-in. You kind of align, goals like, here's what the priority is for tomorrow, maybe spouting off a couple of action items, making sure everyone's on the same page. Very much a manager kind of check-in. So maybe you're still helping your student with regulating their sleep. Like Janina was saying before, they have to be at school at a particular time. Some of them have part-time jobs. Some of them are on schedules where they're taking part-time college courses, so they have a different schedule on Tuesday and Thursdays. And so all of that is management for getting them where they need to be at the right time, and many of them do stay up late doing homework, but you probably have some standards that you enforce in your home about sleep and getting that foundational amount of sleep. And then some parents are, logging into learning management systems, high school learning management systems, and might be able to see homework assignments. They might be able to see, projects that are coming up and, class trips and concerts and all that good stuff. And that reality is the fact that your student knows that you can do that, that's a form of accountability. They know that that's a supportive thing that you're doing, being aware of that. Even if you're not, managing the deadlines and things, the fact that you can see that stuff is a form of accountability. You may even encourage and support kind of extracurricular involvement, which, whether you believe it or not or realize it, supports their involvement in those extracurricular things. When a student almost has like a body double, like, oh, my mom comes to all my games, or my parents are in band boosters, or my parents raise money for my flag corps team, whatever it is, your presence and involvement in those things form structure around the student's life. You might even parallel social engagement by being friends with the parents of some of your child's friends. All of those things are different kinds of support that your child benefits from. And of course, we're all just trying to be good parents here. You're providing that emotional safety, that advocacy if you have to. Maybe you're letting the child try to advocate for themselves. Like, you need to talk to your teachers about that. I'm not writing an email. But at the same time, your child knows that you are there, you're in their corner. So, all in all, the structure that you're providing as kind of in this managerial role is high expectations and a values driven environment. You are basically saying, this is who we are as a member of this family. This is how we do school, right? We're learners and we engage and we're supportive. So that's going to end very abruptly. Many of you are planning high school graduation parties right now. In the next 2 weeks, they're going to walk across that stage and have that high school diploma. And the minute they go off to school in August, things are going to change. So we can go to the next slide. So guess what? You are now a consultant. You are no longer a manager. And of course, many of us are cheering. We're so happy because this is the day that we've, been waiting for. We've invested 18 years into our children. We have shown up consistently. We've provided structure. We've provided gentle guidance. We've fed them, driven them, provided the snacks, done all the things. And guess what you get as a reward for that? You get to just be consulted and they take your suggestions under advisement. One thing that some of you may not be aware of is the grade, health, enrollment, and financial aid details are only going to be shared with you at the discretion of your student, and it has to be granted in writing. So, in other words, because of the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, also called the Buckley Amendment of 1974, um, college students, because they are 18-year-old adults, do not have to share the details of their enrollment with you or anyone else. Again, unless that permission is granted in writing. So some universities do have a form through the registrar's office that allows you to access that information. But it is important for you to realize that it's not going to be as accessible to you as it currently is. And it's a good thing, essentially, because they are 18 years old. They can vote. They can serve in the military. They are the age of an adult. And so they do need some agency over this information. But what I'm saying is that structure, that scaffolding that you held up by being aware of those things kind of goes away. Okay. Other things like just, checking in with your student. You used to have daily check-ins where you saw them every day. I hate to deliver this news, but it may be only weekly at best. It may be a quick 30-minute call, maybe a FaceTime. But, there are some times where you're so focused on kind of quality of life kinds of things where you want to hear how it is and you want to hear if they went to the event and you want to hear how classes are. Well, then that doesn't leave a lot of time for the details. And of course, because they are growing in independence, they don't want to share a lot of those details with you. Okay, so it is a normal part of their development at this age not to want to share some of those things with you. So again, that scaffolding kind of starts to disappear. 100% personal agency over how they spend their time. This is both a feature and a bug. So, yes, they do need to be making more decisions. They need to be in the role of creating the life they say they want. But for a student with ADHD, many don't know what that looks like. Many haven't thought of that. They might think, oh, I might want to be something like this when I grow up. But they haven't connected the dots that the way they show up every day in the small daily action steps of their behaviors are how they spend their time. And again, that time blindness that Janina referred to earlier can be a huge bug in the system because freedom feels wonderful and things that are due next week do not feel important at all yet because folks with ADHD respond to urgency, not importance, I'm sorry, urgency, challenge, novelty, and there's one more I can't remember. It'll come to me. But so an ADHD nervous system is not wired for importance. That is one of the most important things for you to hear. It's wired for urgency. It's wired for interest. That's what I think that's the fourth one. It's wired for things that generate dopamine, and importance does not always generate dopamine. Okay. So that quest for independence and maturity, and again, just because they're independent does not mean that they are mature. One does not automatically lead to the other. They may be functioning somewhat independently on their college campus, but that does not mean that they're making wise choices, as Janina suggested. So that leaves them considering you to be, you know, giving them suggestions, encouraging them, and making inferences. And inferences are one of the things that folks with ADHD have the hardest time with. It means I'm supposed to collect all the information you're giving to me and draw a conclusion. And if I don't have experience with that, that's going to be much harder for me to understand. So the milieu or the environment that they're going to be in on a college campus, it emphasizes academics, but it also emphasizes that social and emotional growth equally. And here's the kicker, it depends on self-referral for help. That means if a student does need help, they have to be convinced sometimes that they need help. And the long uphill walk to whatever office they need help from feels hard and can produce a lot of anxiety. So I just want to kind of contrast, the changes in your role. And again, it's a reason to celebrate, but it's also a reason for us to be aware and ready for that transition. And so I want to tell you a couple of stories about some clients that we have served in my practice. And a a couple of them are combinations of a few different students. One is one particular person I was thinking of, but all the names have been changed. And any student who works with us has complete confidentiality. We hold ourselves to the highest standards of confidentiality. And so, of course, these are just vignettes that have been taken from a few different situations. So you can go ahead and move the slide forward. So I want to talk about Carter. Um, Carter was a very high performing um, student in high school who went to a large state university in the South with a big football program, could be a lot of schools, right? A big football program and a very loud and proud Greek life culture. He went on a full national merit scholarship and he knew he would be a STEM major. He was either going to be in computer science, physics, or engineering. Okay. He didn't know which one, but his freshman year, he knew he would be taking a lot of intro level kind of hard STEM courses, math and science courses. In high school, he scored 4s and 5s on all of his AP exams. So he had 12 credits going in. In high school, he declined his ADHD accommodations. He thought, I can do this, no problem. And he just felt really confident that he wouldn't need accommodations when he went to college because he had done so well in high school taking college level courses. So his high school success, really, in hindsight, was built on his amazing ability to perform on standardized tests. And also, he benefited quite a bit from parental structure, from the fact that his parents, were very supportive. They helped maintain his motivation. They were so proud that he was functioning at such a high level academically, which who wouldn't be, right? That's very exciting that your child has certain talents like that. But here's what his primary traps were: the intense rigor of STEM coursework with this very high distraction social environment where there was something going on all the time around him. It was either, football rallies or, sorority events happening out in the middle of campus, or, there were just things happening all the time at a large state university. And so the whole thing he felt kind of isolated because he wasn't in Greek life. He didn't have anything to do with the band or the football team. And all of that just began to feel complex, unfamiliar, and his inability to plan and prioritize and keeping up with the pace of those very rigorous STEM courses, unfortunately, it didn't turn out well for Carter in his freshman year. So he had difficulty with task initiation, with impulse control. He was playing a lot of video games, and he lost his scholarship, a full scholarship, which was really difficult for his family. When he came to me, he had very low confidence. And through, I think, 2 semesters with us, he got back. Now, he did not go back to his chosen university because it was out of state and his parents no longer had the scholarship to back that up. But we got him back into a state university in his state where he could enroll. We recovered his GPA. But the real story here is that Carter was a different student going back into his degree. He was more confident. He knew himself better. He had clearer goals. He didn't think he had to have goals. And so he was just a much more confident and clear student. The good news is he recovered his GPA eventually to get his state's lottery funded scholarship. So toward the end of his degree, he did get some financial help with his education. So that's Carter. No one would have ever predicted that someone who did so well in high school would have had such a hard time, but coaching could have prevented that. This is Teresita. This is what I call the high cost of wait and see. When we send our kids off to college, we go, have a great time, study hard, and we send them off with this tremendous hope that they will be able to do it. And hope is a wonderful thing, but we also have to be realistic about our child's limits too. So by the time Teresita came to me, she was a fifth year senior. Her parents had just paid for her fifth semester. I mean, her fifth year, the fall, she was a fifth year senior halfway through that year. So she had this big capstone project that she had to do, long, big paper with research. She had some comorbid health conditions with her ADHD. She had a horrible case of what I call avoidance procrastination. The mere thought of doing the work that needed to be done triggered anxiety in her and just caused her to want to avoid. Now, the uncomfortable truth about avoidance procrastination is that the only way to the other side is through it. And so, if we were to say, it's okay, you don't have to do it, or if a university had said, okay, we're gonna pare down this project for you, well, that would mean every time in the future that she had to do something big and difficult, she would be triggered again. And she really wouldn't be able to do that. So we found a way to work with her. She had been so overwhelmed by the project previously that she dropped it the fall of her senior year. And so spring of her senior year is when she started working with me. But by the time her parents found us, they had already paid for that extra year. Okay. Her primary traps were ambiguity and avoidance procrastination. So if she didn't really know what to do, instead of, talking to professor or reading the assignment more clearly, she just kind of lived in this state of ambiguity about what had to be done, which ambiguity and anxiety go hand in hand. So she also had a really critical edge and had a hard time starting anything because her perfectionist vision of what it should be would basically disappear as soon as she started something. So she had a hard time with that, overcoming that perfectionism. But through coaching, we broke the capstone into micro goals. We had accountability meetings for her writing milestones. Um, we we counted all of the things that she was grateful for every week, and her anxiety began to pale in comparison to all the things that she could be grateful for. This was my favorite thing. She graduated that last semester with her highest GPA of all 10 of her semesters. And she even got an A. Her advisor had misadvised her and found out her last semester that she had to pick up a 6-week course at a local community college. And she even got an A in that class as well, but she had her highest GPA. And so it was a huge boost to her self esteem, her sense that she can do hard things. And the big takeaway from that one is her parents said that we wished we had found you sooner. So that I like to think that if we had worked with Teresita sooner, uh, perhaps some of those challenges would have been managed and tools introduced. You know, some students take medication to support their ADHD, but as Janina was referencing, I like to say pills aren't skills. You know, yes, they need medication if it's prescribed, but it's the skill building. It's learning how to manage these difficult things and to break them down to make them possible that is the real story here. All right, just one more and then we'll try to wrap up. So this is Aaron. Aaron was a sophomore with a new ADHD diagnosis. So he did well enough in high school. He was, going to his local state university. He never really had many academic issues. He did well enough. That's how his parents described it to me, is that he did well enough. He got A's, B's, and some C's in high school. He didn't take a lot of, AP courses. He simply did his local high school curriculum. And this is similar to what Janina was referencing, how students in high schools all around the country are prepared differently. And so after his first semester, when he did well or well enough again, he hit this cognitive wall and he realized that he's never really had to do much analysis, evaluating, or heaven forbid, depend on what he knows, understands, remembers, analyzes, evaluates, applies, all of those levels of Bloom's taxonomy. He never had to work at the higher end of that. And he started asking real questions about his learning and his ability to learn. And he asked for not a diagnosis. He asked to be evaluated, and his parents accommodated that. They went through their insurance, and he was diagnosed with inattentive type ADD type 1. So that's where the hyperactive part is really more internal than external. So he enrolled in our Focus Forward group coaching, and he met his GPA goals for the semester. But the big deal is that he learned how his ADHD impacts his performance. And he learned how to use skills in the moment to help him manage the difficult things. So the point here is, we looked at the manager role that you've had, we looked at the consulting role that you're going to have, the loss of scaffolding of the supportive things that your student has benefited from by growing up in your home is going to suddenly be just theirs to pick up and build on their own. And for students with ADHD, that is like adding a major project. That's like saying, okay, build one of the 7 wonders of the world and go to class every day and earn this degree. We are asking them to put all the pieces back together in a way that works for them in a new situation with new requirements, new demands on their cognitive, structures. And the point is that coaching helps provide that structure in a stepstone kind of a way. And if you could go to the last slide. So it does all of this in what I like to say is a judgment-free zone. So students never hear tisk tisk from us. What they do hear is tell me more. Tell me, tell me what happened. Tell me what your decisions were leading up to that. So we start out, and you can see on this is kind of our scaffolded approach to supporting your student. Early weeks of the semester, we're establishing rapport, we're creating safety, we're saying this is a place where you can be honest and you can tell us all the things that are going on, all the things that make life a little difficult for you right now, all the things that seem huge, because that catastrophizing can be a big part of ADHD as well. But our goal is to provide a safe place to collaborate and not to tell. Again, they don't need to be told at this age. They need to be active participants in their own thinking. We also talk about action steps. We talk about plans. We talk about what might get in the way and how you could kind of go around what could get in the way. We also look at all of this through an ADHD lens, which is critical. Some coaches don't have that very specific knowledge of how ADHD impacts a person. And then we hope for the wonder of being a young person on a college campus and growing and learning and having light bulb aha moments and making decisions about your future that line up with your values. But all of that happens through this container of coaching that includes implementing strategies, adjusting along the way, reflecting on choices, and making new plans, really breaking things down so that over time they are motivated to move forward. They own their own success. I love to tell my clients, I am just a witness. You are the real hero here. Because by the end, they are then reporting to me how they have become a high performing student. And that is the butter on my pancake. I mean, that is just the best. So this is the kind of professional model that we use in all of our programs. And it includes all the things that you see there and a lot more. If you could go to the next slide. One of the most important questions I think needs to be asked is, what would it mean to my family for our student to be able to manage these things independently? That is a key question I want to leave you with. What would it mean to your family? Okay. As Janina said, we know that coaching increases retention rates. I could cite study after study. If you'd like those studies, I can share those with you. I think I have some of them on my website. Um, Coaching prevents that false start or a very stressful semester of failed classes followed followed by just this dire high stress GPA recovery semester in the spring. For anyone in Georgia, they have 30 hours before their Zell or Hope is reevaluated. And so, if they've failed, 2 out of 4 classes and gotten a C and a D the first semester, they've essentially, depending on their major, maybe only earned 6 credit hours. And you know, it puts a lot of pressure on spring semester. So coaching going in, like having a coach, bringing a coach to college, which is one of our programs that we offer, reduces stress so that students can perform at their potential by just having some structures in place and then gradually letting those scaffolded structures fall away as confidence and performance follow through. Okay, so we want to get over those most common transition traps. So this ends up being a significant financial savings for a family, especially if your child does qualify for a GPA dependent scholarship like the Hope or Zell. Because of the investment you're making, you're helping to retain the scholarship because getting it back is not easy. And I also want to mention, as Janina alluded to, this is about more than getting through college. These skills, these executive functions that students are challenged with, are about career readiness. The coaching skills, learning to evaluate your own thinking, having a plan in place for how to deal with your own time blindness and make things feel urgent now using timers. Who knows, there's all kinds of, there's just tons of things out there. And having accountability, those are supportive of workplace success. And so you are building your future professional when you make this investment. um, and so they're life skills. And so this is really a way that not only can you give to your student, but your student eventually gives back. And it avoids a lot of stress and anxiety. So just to end, we want to thank you for being with us. Thank you for following to the end. If we can be of any assistance, there's our information. You can take a screenshot if you need to, and then or you can just go to the website. Uh, there's a form that you can fill out that automatically triggers me to send you the link to schedule a complimentary evaluation, a screening call, where we could learn more about your student and talk about potential supportive services. So I want to thank Janina once again. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone for being with us. Good night, everyone.